Hello, everyone, and welcome. So, finally, I have the chance to talk about the festival, the music festival that I attended in Brazil last week. It was, if you watched the last video that I put up, it's the Sao Paulo Contemporary Composers Festival from the 21st to the 29th of September. So, what I'll do today is I'll discuss a little bit about it, tell you what we did each day, and primarily just show you some pictures. That's what this video will be about today. So, let's see. We'll start off on the first day, the 21st, is when we all arrived. We were staying at a little hotel Ibis. That was a Ibis budget, I think is what it was called. And pretty nice accommodations, I think anyway. And it was a pretty centralized part of town, pretty close to Avenida Paulista, which is sort of the main avenue in Sao Paulo, where you have a lot of stuff. I'll get into that more as we go. There's a museum that is a very nice museum there that I got a chance to look around and so forth. But anyway, let's talk about this festival. So, the 21st we arrived, and actually before I get started with all of this, let me just, go right to the review, I guess, and just say that this was an excellent festival. Every day the schedule was pretty well packed, so we would get up at 7 o'clock every morning and pretty well hit it after breakfast, and I'll tell you what we were doing each day there. But this was an excellent festival. All the composers who showed up there, I felt like by the end of the week that I had a new group of brothers and sisters there. That's how nice everything was. That's how cool everybody was, and how fun it was, to hang out with everybody during this festival. So let's get to what we were doing. So on the 21st, like I said, we arrived. Met for lunch pretty much immediately. Actually, I was slightly late, just a few minutes, but they had lunch at this little place around the corner, and so I got to go in there and start talking to everybody and see who was who. It just so happened that I sat next to a guy who went to the festival that I attended earlier this year, which was in Alba, Italy, so, we immediately had some things to talk about. But, in general, we all had a lot of stuff to talk about, obviously, because we're all composers and musicians, and so on. This festival was a little more diverse as far as the countries that were represented than any other festival that I've attended. I don't remember. I heard maybe 11 countries. I also heard some people say that there were 14 countries that were represented. But I met. This is the first time I ever met someone from the Czech Republic. So that was pretty cool, and there was a guy there from Russia, and where we had Israel and South Korea represented, and many other places that if I get a chance to look into it, maybe I'll put this in later. But anyway, so we started talking at this lunch, and then right after that, we got started. So we got on the subway right after that and went, just a few stops away. It wasn't very far away, to this building where a lot of the things would take place. So we had a lot of the stuff scheduled taking place in this particular building. So we had lectures there. We had some rehearsals take place there, and things of that nature. But anyway, that first day, once we got to this other building, we did more formal introductions, and we just kind of went around the room, and everybody talked about, either where we were from or where we studied or something interesting that had nothing to do with music that we could talk about ourselves, for a second, just something to get everybody talking a little bit more than we did just at lunch. And then after that, we had our first lecture. So like I said, this was, almost as soon as everyone got off the plane, we started this thing. And that first lecture was with a composer who does primarily electronic music. His name is Silvio Ferraz, and he put on an excellent lecture. He talked a lot about Max MSP, that kind of stuff, because that's what he was using at the time when he put together the musical excerpts that he showed us. And it was excellent. And then let's see, after that, I mean, we went on to this place closer to the hotel. It was, a place that had really good food. It was interesting. We were a little skeptical at first, and not everybody in the group went, but a pretty good portion of us got together to go, because a lot of people, were just getting off the plane that morning, and they're coming from the other side of the world, so there's a lot of jet lag going on. So some people were just like, after the lecture, they were ready to just take a nap, and just prepare for the rest of the week. So anyway, a few of us went to this restaurant. Like I said, we were skeptical at first because we got there and there was just no one there. And we thought, man, we were told that this was an excellent place. What's going on? But anyway, we went in and we gave it a shot, and it was excellent food. That's basically the first day. It was a lot more full than it sounds, because I'm just talking about getting to know each other, a lecture and dinner. But it was a pretty packed day. So the second day was Saturday the 22nd, and on this day we had a lecture. There were some rehearsals and a visit to a couple different parks. We didn't all visit both parks, and I think maybe some people didn't visit any park, but there were two parks that people had available to them. I went to the one that actually I don't think anyone else really, I think there were just three of us that went to this park, and that's because I hadn't seen it before, but the other one I had seen. So anyway, how this happened on the 22nd is we went back to the same building we'd been to the day before, which is, again, a couple subway stops away. And we first saw a lecture given by Professor Nick Johnson. He's a musicologist. And his lecture was called Postmodernism as a Lens to 21st Century Music, which I'm sure you can imagine that, in just one lecture, one brief lecture, it was probably an hour and a half, close to 2 hours long, I guess. We really just sort of just scratched the surface of what that title actually even meant and what it would be to study something like that. So there were some names, some historical names, some pieces of music, some just philosophical ideas, things of that nature. But that's not really enough time to get deeply into that kind of topic. But the lecture itself was very well presented. It was an excellent presentation. After this was the trip to the park, and a lot of people went to one park. Don't remember, Ibirapuera Park is that one that they went to. It's a much bigger park than the one I went to. I went to one called, I was calling it Whitewater because of the translation from the Portuguese, which, so it'd be Agua Branca Park. And so anyway, that was interesting. You're going to see a few pictures here. Yes, there were chickens just running around in that park. That was interesting to see. But it was neat. It was neat to walk around in this park. Went there with one of the other guys who was there sort of on faculty. His name is Cardo Calderoni, who's a composer and a conductor in Brazil. We talked. It was fascinating just, to talk to him, to see, about his career and how it's going, and the commissions that he's gotten and so forth. So that was very cool. Then we went back to the building where there were rehearsals going on. And I didn't have a rehearsal this day, but I wanted to see what the other composers had going on, basically. And I wanted to see this particular ensemble. It was a string quintet, I believe. And again, I say I believe because I don't know if it was a quartet with an added bass or a quintet or what exactly the case was. I think it was a quintet. But they also, they played as a quintet with an added guitarist, and then there were some pieces they played that were just solo violin and things of that nature. I think there was a quartet that was played. So, just various groupings of that ensemble. Then later that night, on Saturday, we went to it was a contemporary ballet, which was interesting. Now, I wanted to read the write-up from this ballet to see what we were getting into, and it was all in Portuguese. Not my Portuguese isn't the greatest, but at least I thought, hey, if I read it, I might get an idea of what it could be. Well, when I read it, I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not really saying anything. It's just talking about the people who were involved and that it's a ballet. So I thought, well, okay, I don't trust my Portuguese, so I tried to have it translated, run it through a translator, and it still didn't tell me anything. And then I talked to people who actually spoke Portuguese, and they're like, yeah, you're right, it's not saying anything. So I didn't know what we were getting into when we went, but when we got there and watched the performance, it was a lot of fun. It seemed to be more of, what they did is they played a lot of original recordings of, like bossa and samba, the types of pop music that, became really big in Brazil, that Brazil sort of, created, actually. And it just kind of seemed like it moved, starting from the earlier pieces of music, and it moved forward. And there was more of like an interpretive dance thing going on. After some time, then the dance turned into, stuff that had a little bit more along the lines of stories to them, I guess, But that's basically what it was. It was a lot of fun. Next would be Sunday the 23rd, and this is the day that we went to the University of Sao Paulo to the music department, where I had my piece rehearsed, and the other people who were using this particular ensemble, the Perot ensemble, or the Quinteto Perot was what they were called, and we had our pieces rehearsed, so I got to hear mine, for the first time by live players, which was neat. After these rehearsals, or after each person had a rehearsal anyway, the composer then was interviewed. So I got interviewed out in this little courtyard, and that was what I found out later to be the first of multiple interviews throughout the week. Just, every so often as they saw fit, we would get interviewed again and again. And, so it was fun. I am eager to see where those interviews end up. So let's see. After that, that was a somewhat long part of the day. So basically that kind of is all what happened. It's all that happened on the 23rd, on Sunday. And, we went for dinner later that night. That was the day that I ended up taking a nap in the middle of the day. I'm just like, I may as well take this downtime to rest up a little bit. Which leads us to Monday the 24th. So earlier in the day, I had my second rehearsal with the quintet. That first day, there was some arguing going on. It was not the most pleasant thing in the world, but the second rehearsal was much nicer, that everyone was more together, and no arguing. So after that, actually there were a couple more interviews. What can I say? We did interviews. We went up on the roof of this other building where we had these rehearsals and did some interviews there. It was neat. It was a lot of fun. Then there was lunch, and then we went to a cathedral. And later on that night, in the cathedral, actually downstairs in the crypt area of the cathedral, there was the first chamber ensemble performance. And that was an excellent show, Can't really say much more about that. The performers, they were younger performers than what I had in my or in the ensemble that played my piece, but they were they were excellent. I really enjoyed that show, and then we had some really good pizza later that night. So that was Monday. Tuesday, what did we do on Tuesday? The 25th, we went to a studio called Studio Panorama, I guess. Interestingly enough, I'll show pictures. Where we were given a tour of the studio by the lecturer who was there. That lecturer was Flo Menezes. And, there were pictures of him on the wall back in the day where he was working with Pierre Boulez and so on. He showed us the entire studio. It was a really cool studio. And then he played a piece for us that was an electronic piece that was set up for, more of a surround sound kind of idea. So, the whole idea is that we had to get as close to the middle of the room as possible to be able to hear this and get the full effect, because we're surrounded by 8 speakers. So that was very cool. And, he showed some software where you're able to, work with the speakers that you have, work with various setups for the speakers and see what kind of sound you're going to expect and what kind of, or where in the room you get the best sound and things of that nature. So that was a lot of fun. That was a really fun lecture. We went then after that across town to another Studio Arsis, where we were going to be in, later in the week to have our pieces recorded. And we had a lecture there by the guitarist Daniel Murray, and he was the guitarist who was performing with both ensembles, and he gave an interesting discussion talking about, it was primarily more contemporary guitar pieces, pieces for prepared guitar and things of that nature. This is very cool, very cool. And that pretty much ended the festival part of the day. So after that, it was kind of open to, we were going to go wherever. So I got together with a few of the people there, a few of the other composers, and we wanted to go to the museum on Avenida Paulista. And this museum is called MASP, M-A-S-P. In there, I'll show a few pictures here. There were some Rembrandts, there were some Manets, and my favorite, the El Greco paintings. So the next day, the 26th, we got up early and we got on a bus and went to a town. It was probably about an hour and a half, maybe actually it's closer to 2 hours away. It's called Campinas, where we went to the university there, and we spent, the next 2 days actually on the campus there. So what we did is, once we got on the campus, that everything started pretty quickly. We had, some of us had 1-minute readings of orchestral pieces done by their orchestra. Mine was one of them, and that was interesting. We got to hear our music, or at least an excerpt of it. Let's see, then after that we had a lecture by, if I'm going to go back here, get his full name and get it stated correctly. It was Fernando Hashimoto, who's a composer and percussionist there. So he gave us a lecture, and he actually also gave us some hands-on work with this, gave us each a percussion instrument, and we played around with this, and he taught us some rhythms, and we played them pretty poorly, So anyway, but it was a lot of fun. Later that day, we got together for dinner. And after dinner, we kind of just hung out at the pool and stuff. Now, one interesting thing about the 26th is that as we were walking around that campus that evening, one of the composers said, why does this campus sound like it has music from a horror flick scoring it? I was listening to it, yeah, that's true. I mean, you kind of hear these weird sort of, it almost sounds like electronic sounds, that are just sustained, maybe some minor seconds going on. We thought, wow, is there a murderer on the loose? What's going on? So I had to film it and get that audio. And so I did a few times, and the last one came out, it was pretty loud actually, but what those was cicadas, which they sounded very different than they do in the United States. So that's why we were all a bit confused, as to what that was. So anyway, that was the 26th overall. The 27th, we continued our time in Campinas, and I had my lesson with Justin De La Gioia that day. They were kind of divided up among a few days, actually, so they started on the 26th. Mine was on the 27th. He also gave a lecture that day, which was very interesting. It was mainly about his works and stuff, which that's kind of like what most of the lecturers did, was just talk about their own works, and that was pretty much it. Actually, I gave a presentation that day as well. I forgot about that, where I talked about my music, and my lecture was basically just about when you get out of college and all of a sudden you're able to write using many different tools and write various styles of music. At least in the classical world, you're approached with the question of, okay, what do you do? what approach do you take, which style are you going to make yours, basically, at that point. So I played two pieces of mine that were of contrasting style that were written at about the same time. So that was fun. That was a fun presentation to give. All the other composers' presentations were great, at least the ones I was able to see. Because one of the things about this festival is that some of the stuff was overlapped. So like I was starting to watch one of the other composers' presentations, and then I had to go off to my lesson, so I wasn't able to see all of it. And that happened to a lot of people. People left my presentation for other things that they had to do. So that's how that worked. Then how the 27th ended was with a show that had some of the other composers' pieces played, and it was also they played a piece by Mozart, some songs by Mahler, and some waltzes by Strauss. Okay, so that brings us to Friday the 28th, which that was primarily studio day. We spent the whole day actually at Studio Arsis, and we had it was mainly just having our pieces recorded, but then at the end of the day, or at the end of all of the recordings, we had a lecture by Hercules Gomez, and he played some piano for us. He, from the very beginning, he said his English is not very good, so he's going to do more playing than speaking. But his English was just fine, and his playing was out of this world. He talked a lot about Brazilian rhythms and styles of music, and played played these for us so we could get an idea of what was going on with all of that, and which I found very interesting because as a guitarist, you always, if you play classical guitar, you're going to play the music of Villa-Lobos, who is from Brazil, and because he's from Brazil, he of course wrote pieces of music that would incorporate these types of rhythms as well. So to hear someone else explain those, it was really interesting for me to hear all of this. That's how the day ended. Earlier in the day, we had sort of a part 2 lecture from Justin De La Gioia, and so that was nice. And that night, let's see, there was dinner somewhere, but I just don't remember offhand where it was. Oh yeah, we just kind of found some side street where there was it was almost like a let's call it food fest going on, because it's just a bunch of people out in the street eating. So yeah, that's where we ate. And that brings us to the last day of the festival, Saturday the 29th. And so on this day, we all got up and got on that subway again and went to the main building, or the first building that we went to, which is where we had the rest of the composers giving their presentations. So we were just, kind of hanging out watching those. Those were fun. There were 5 of them that day. And then after that, we went back to the hotel to really just get ready for the final event of the festival, which was the performance given by Quinteto Perot. And so my piece was performed there. It was the last piece performed. So basically, I guess I was responsible for the very last thing that happened for this festival, I guess you could say. So anyway, it was nice. It was a nice performance overall. They did really well, and the composers did really well as far as what they composed for this. So it was a lot of fun. After that, after that show, we all just kind of went back to the hotel, got changed, and kind of got ready to just hang out for the evening. And that's what we did. We ran around and we found a couple places, a couple watering holes, I guess, and just kind of hung out and ate and had some drinks and kind of wrapped up the festival, exchanging business cards and talking about future projects and things like that some of us may want to get involved with. But overall, like I said, this was an excellent festival. The composers who were involved were great people. I enjoyed talking to all these men and women. They were wonderful. And the organizer, Michael Paulo, did a great job with it. He also had Diogo Carvalho working with him on this. And, they did an excellent job overall. So yeah, if in the future, if you are a composer and you'd be interested in something like this, I would highly recommend it. the Sao Paulo Contemporary Composers Festival. I believe this is the first year this was done. Yeah, this is the first year that this one was done. So I'm sure he's going to continue it on in the future. So it's something that I would definitely recommend. And yeah, I think that's about all for this video. I've probably spoken long enough, so there you have it.